When we talk about racial issues, something which is bound to come up from time to time is black nationalism. Here I'm going to give you some of my basic thoughts on black nationalism and whether it is a good thing or a bad thing. This is going to be simple. Whether black nationalism is a good thing or a bad thing all comes down to what we mean by nationalism. Black nationalism is obviously a bad thing if, like most other forms of nationalism, it deteriorates into tribalism and the devaluation of lives outside of the in-group that holds these nationalist views. In this case, nationalism is obviously a bad thing, as it devalues lives and leads to people being harmed. But separatism, as a version of black nationalism, is also obviously problematic for the reasons stated above, and because it is generally just a racist and dumb worldview, in the same ways that white nationalism is. In many cases, black nationalism will necessarily deteriorate to the point that it meets these standards and can accurately be called a bad thing. In some cases, however, it may not be a bad thing. Some may argue that nationalism is necessarily bad, and any of the kinds of people I am about to mention are not nationalists at all. Some people call themselves black nationalists but are merely interested in deconstructing systemic racism. This is obviously entirely different to the negatives I mentioned earlier. As I stated earlier, whether or not these people are nationalists at all is up for debate. These more moderate civil rights supporters, sometimes calling themselves nationalists, are far from the more harmful black separatists. The label of nationalist has in some ways taken up a different meaning with underclasses and marginalized groups who view nationalism as a road towards freedom and self-determination. This is how many of the anti-colonial movements of the 20th century operated, for example. Anti-colonial movements often called themselves nationalist as they fought against the oppressive colonialism of larger Western states. One could say that an underclass can use nationalism as a tool for its liberation. An overclass, meanwhile, uses it to exert power over the oppressed. At the end of the day, my position on black nationalism is simple. It all comes down to what you mean by nationalism. If your nationalism is merely wanting to end systemic racism, then I agree with you. If your nationalism is an ideology of supremacy, then I view you as an enemy, as your ideas will lead to suffering and misery. It is that simple.